Ni hao, sophomores. Ni hao is a greeting in Mandarin, the dominant language of China, but by no means the only language of China. Ni hao is hello, or more precisely, you good? So, you good? Let's do this. Talking today about economic structures in classical China. Our objective is number 8, during the classical period. So, what is the classical period? Well, before I continue, I should mention that, of course, you can pause at any time or slow me down if you think I'm speaking at a John Green clip. I try not to speak quite as fast, but he has a much greater production value than I do. Anyway, just a note on timing. Where are we? Well, we're in classical China. So we're talking about 3 dynasties. The Zhou, which lasts about 800 years, from 1029 to 258 BCE. The Qin, which takes over after the Warring States period under the leadership of Shi Huangdi, from 221 to 202 BCE, and the Han from 202 BCE to 220 CE, which coincides with the Roman Empire. Speaking of what happens at the same time, in class, actually I think today, you spoke about Taoism and Confucianism, which are philosophies and religions that start right around the same time, right around 500. Okay. So what do we mean by economic development? Well, some examples and non-examples. First of all, if there's a new system to pay for and exchange goods, later on you're going to learn about the Silk Road. This would be, in a sense, a new system, or even more specifically, so to pay for these goods or exchange goods, if we develop paper money, this would be a new system of paying for exchanging goods, as opposed to bartering, which might have preceded it. A new system of trade. This is actually the better connection to the Silk Road. So if now we're trading by riverboats or across oceans, on planes, on trucks, these systems of trade would be considered economic developments. Or new industries. So right now I'm speaking to you via a computer and the internet. These are computing industries that didn't exist a century ago, or even by certain measures 30 years ago. The internet was barely together. So these are new industries, but these later. So what about in China in particular? Well, the key here is that China, in the classical period, developed many routes of trade. And so they have an extensive internal trade. That is, they trade much more within their own regions than outside between other countries. And this is important, especially during the Han Dynasty. And during that Han Dynasty, they end up developing new technologies. In agriculture, the ox-drawn plow. So in order to farm more easily, attach a plow to an ox, and it makes the process of farming easier. They came up with a new collar on draft animals. These are the animals like oxen that pull things. Before, the collars would choke them, and the Chinese developed a way to have them pull a plow without choking the animal. Seems legitimate and logical, but something that didn't exist for centuries before it. They developed iron making, they made lamps, they came up with better seeds and tools, and all of this allowed them to increase the size of the population. So that's kind of why so many would an agricultural focus, because with more food production, they could focus on other items, right? Just as we discussed with the Neolithic Revolution, farming allows civilization to flourish. And they developed other systems, like in terms of educational and bureaucratic technology. Paper. Chinese are responsible for the development of paper, and this allows for the development of education, especially when we get to the increased awareness of and attention to education under the rule of Wu Di. So with paper, we can have books, we can have the masses learn more information and be better Chinese citizens. And so this made their economy quite strong. So, the Silk Road. You might wonder, was it just one road? The answer is no. It was many different routes, and it had a lot of different roads that connected China to India, to the Middle East, to Europe. Was it used for transporting? Well, it was more used for the transportation of goods. So merchants would travel it and sell items from place to place. Let's see if we can get a map up here. And why is it called the Silk Road? Well, partially because the luxury item of silk, which was produced in China using silkworms and took a really long time to actually make, and was a unique good in the Middle East and Europe, was something that European merchants really desired. And the thing to know is, let's pull up a map. So here's an old-timey map of the Silk Road. You can see China over here, India, Persia, and Byzantium as we head into Europe. It also extended even into this Middle Eastern area and into Egypt and Africa. So this map, you can see these dots, in fact, on your map on the back. You have a few different dots, and what you could do is connect them and add the names of at least 3 cities. Ones I might point out are Chang'an in China, off on to the east, so on the right. Samarkand, you're going to hear more about later when we get to the Mongols. That's toward the middle. And then we have some Middle Eastern cities in Aleppo and Damascus and Syria. These cities are significant right now as Syria continues to fight a war with the Islamic State and between the government. Jerusalem, Babylon, these are significant cities in the Middle East. So anyway, the Silk Road connects all of these things. The thing to know is merchants. What do merchants want? They want to make a profit. They want to make money. So if silk is produced by Chang'an and brought to Lanzhou, just one stop over, whatever the price was at Chang'an, it's got to be higher at Lanzhou. Otherwise, the merchant won't make much money. And perhaps if you can go even further to Dunhuang, he can make even more money. Now, most people weren't actually traveling the entire Silk Road. They were going 1 or 2 stops along. But the goal was always to pick up products in one area and sell them for higher prices in others. Silk, why is it the Silk Road, as we asked before? Because silk was this prized good that characterized the road, this idea of taking luxury items that people to the west want from the east and selling them along the way. So it's a lot of artisan goods between the wealthy urban elite. So if you live in Damascus and you want a silk robe, well, you have to get it from somebody who brings it to you from Babylon, who got it from someone else perhaps in the stop before that, who got it from someone else in the stop before that. Some people would travel multiple stops, but most people would just go 1 stop or 2 at a time, back and forth, selling goods and making profits. There was also some food exchange between rice. So Wu Di is the emperor of one of the significant emperors of Han China, and he leaves quite a legacy. First of all, the infrastructure of China is greatly developed through canals and roads, so they can transport items through water and along the land. He set up granaries across the empire. So before granaries, if you grew corn or some other crop, it could only last as long as corn would last. But with a granary, you could put it underground and preserve it. So this allowed the government to buy grain when it was abundant and stockpile it, save lots of it, and then sell it at stable prices when it was scarce, when there wasn't much of it. So it allowed the government to more efficiently produce and distribute grain. And then we have a government monopoly, more on monopolies later this week, but there's a government monopoly on iron and salt. What is a monopoly? Well, this means that there is no other business in town than the government of China when it comes to iron and salt. Only the Han dynasty, only the Chinese government could produce and sell, that is, iron and salt, which there's actually an entire book written about the history of the world through salt. Salt is significant. This is how Roman soldiers would get paid, worth their salt. In fact, a salary comes from the word salt. So even payment used to be through salt. So salt is very important. Gandhi in India, many centuries later, marched to the sea for salt. Anyway, I'm getting a little off track here, but the point is, salt matters more than we think. We take salt for granted, but back in ancient China and other civilizations, it is an important commodity. And then he ends up having a policy of expansion. If you notice, the Han Dynasty, this map doesn't show it quite as well as some of the others you had seen, but it's much bigger than the previous dynasties in China, than the Zhou and the Qin. And so this policy of expansionism allows him through war, through battles, to expand his borders, push out the nomads, and spread Chinese influence. Just like you're going to learn about Hellenism in ancient Greece, there's Chinese influence now in Manchuria, in the north, Korea, which is that peninsula off on the top right, in the east, northern Vietnam, farther south, Tibet, which is to the west, and Central Asia. Basically, China becomes the dominant power in Asia as a result of Wu Di, the economic growth under Wu Di, and the Han Dynasty. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.